Imagine trying to do something good for your body, like make a high protein smoothie for breakfast or after a workout, only to find your protein powder is full of junk. Heavy metals, artificial sweeteners, and chemicals you can't even pronounce. It is frustrating when you try to do the right thing, but instead you just end up adding to the toxic burden in your body. As someone who cares deeply about what goes into my body, as well as the patients that I work with, I believe that what we consume regularly needs to support our health, not silently sabotage it. That's why I use Puri. Their protein powder is made from clean, high-quality ingredients, and it's third-party tested for heavy metals and contaminants because they don't just say it's pure, they actually prove it. You can find collagen peptides, whey protein, and plant-based options on their website. Check them out at puri.com. That's PUORI.com, and use the code LIFEAFTERIMPACT for a 20% discount on your first order.
The body's ability to the brain's ability to use lactate and ketones doesn't appear to be impacted by the concussion, where we know glucose metabolism goes kind of goofy.
Welcome to Life After Impact, the Concussion Recovery Podcast. I'm Dr. Ayla Wolf, and I will be hosting today's episode where we help you navigate the often confusing, frustrating, and overwhelming journey of concussion and brain injury recovery. This podcast is your go-to resource for actionable information, whether you're dealing with a recent concussion, struggling with post-concussion syndrome, or just feeling stuck in your healing process. In each episode, we dive deep into the symptoms, testing, treatments, and neurological insights that can help you move forward with clarity and confidence. We bring you leading experts in the world of brain health, functional neurology, and rehabilitation to share their wisdom and strategies. So if you're feeling lost, hopeless, or like no one understands what you're going through, know that you are not alone. This podcast can be your guide and partner in recovery, helping you build a better life after impact. So what are your thoughts on other things that help to, so obviously the whole point of the exercise is that it helps to tone the autonomic nervous system, which is affected by the concussion, but there's other things that help to tone the autonomic nervous system, like cold plunge and infrared sauna and all these other things people are doing in terms of breath work. So are there certain things that you particularly gravitate to or recommend to people when it comes to like recovering from a workout or, doing these kind of autonomic type therapies?
Yeah, if I have HRV and data to show someone's probably very sympathetic, I may even have them do some parasympathetic stuff before exercise, right? So try to get them at a lower state so they have more physiologic headroom to play with. So anything that increases parasympathetic vagal tone, breathing, anything that has a longer exhale in general will increase parasympathetic tone. Visual stuff like being able to sit with like a very wide, relaxed gaze. Walking's pretty good too, because you have the basically optic flow of that. Those are probably the main ones I use. Like I have used some red light therapy. I think it can be good. The caveat you have to watch out with that is if you do too much too soon, you do have a fair amount of ROS that is built up, reactive oxygen species. So I tend to be a little bit more conservative on the times with that. So if they have a 2-panel and they're sitting in front of it, I have people just start at 5 minutes, which is probably pretty conservative. I think heat can be good. Just you have to watch out for the symptoms, and it's highly individual. But if they can tolerate some heat and they feel relaxed by doing it and they feel better, I think that can be useful. I'm kind of on the fence on cold water immersion. If I do it, I would have them start actually quite, air quotes, warm, probably 55, 60 degrees. And I would try to go more for time and less intensity. So we do know that as you sit in there, like initially you're going to have, depending on the coldness, a gas reflex. More of your sympathetic nervous system that's on your skin is going to get lit up by the cold water. If it's not as cold, you get a little bit less of that. And then it does look like over time you do become a little bit more parasympathetic. And I think mentally, it's a good exercise to teach people they can absorb certain types of stressors. So I think it could be useful for that. You just have to watch their HRV, because most of the time when people try it, they've watched Joe Rogan too many times and they set it at 35 degrees and they're almost shivering when they get out of there, and their HRV is like freaking dog shit the next day. And it's like, yeah, that was just a whole sympathetic experience. Like, that's probably not going to necessarily help you. But, I find it's variable with that. You can go further down that rabbit hole and then try to get more, just what's called a mammalian dive reflex. So that would be getting more of the face in cold water only, and then probably doing a breath hold at that point. For God's sakes, don't do any Wim Hof high rate of breathing or anything like that beforehand, because you can have a shallow water blackout and die and drown. So don't do that. But just a simple breath hold, stick your face in cold water. You will get a lot more parasympathetic tone with that. So if people are going to play with cold water, that's probably where I would start, especially if they're more on the sympathetic side. Supplement stuff can help, usually magnesium. There's some debate about magnesium L-threonate. The data on it I've seen is mixed, but some people respond really well to it. Some people don't. I just found that it's quite variable, but magnesium in general can be beneficial, especially before bed. I do like magnesium bisglycinate if I had to pick one form. Most likely it probably does cross the blood-brain barrier. It's pretty inexpensive. Get it into capsules. Don't get into powder. It tastes absolutely freaking horrible. So bad. Omega-3s can be helpful with that. And again, I'm a big fan of ketones. Again, I do some work for Tecton. They make a ketone ester. The benefit with ketone esters is you can consume them as a supplement. You can get up to a high level of ketosis within 15, 20 minutes. We've seen people hit 1 or 2 millimolar very easily. We had people hit 4 millimolar. Dosage is probably 10 to 20 grams. And then the benefit of them is, say again?
I said, how do those taste?
Almost all of them on the market taste absolutely horrendously bad. Like the first one I ever had was from via Dom D'Agostino. I wouldn't say who, but a buddy of his was running a supplement company, decided to make it. I know the chemist who actually made it. He's like, hey man, I have this new ketone. You want to, he didn't tell me what it was. He's like, I have a new supplement. Do you want to try it out? I'm like, sure. It's like, I tell you, it's grass safe. It's non-hormonal, but whatever you do, don't throw it up because it is ungodly expensive to make. This is probably 8 years ago now. I'm like, okay, sure. Whatever, man. So he sends me a little container this big. He went to Home Depot and bought like a Good Grips like thing to measure freaking glue in. No COA, no return address, like nothing, no label, like no nothing. And I get this and I'm sitting here in my kitchen looking, going, God, do I really want to do this? Like I haven't met this guy in person. I've talked to him for like 12 years online. Is this like the world's longest?
Just sent me a white unlabeled powder.
Yeah. And so I open it and I'm like, smell it. And I'm like, not much smell to it. And so I tried it and I've never had jet fuel in my life, but that's exactly what it reminded me of. And I'm standing over my sink, like literally trying not to vomit it out, like back in my sink. It was horrendously bad. So I think what it was is a compound called 1,3-butanediol. It was originally used as potentially a food alternative for NASA back in the 70s, but they dropped it. And it's a precursor to ketones. So it will convert to some ketones in the liver, but also converts to a diol path to high enough doses converts to an alcohol. So I would not recommend that one, and it tastes pretty horrible. The other ketones are not much better tasting, but the Tecton one is, again, I'm biased because I work for the company, actually pretty decent. So they took the BHB molecule and they just bonded it to glycerol. So there's nothing else in it besides BHB, which is the ketone, and then glycerol. So it makes it through digestion, gets cleaved. Glycerol just gets processed by the liver, which is a breakdown of free fatty acids.
So it's beta hydroxybutyrate with glycerol.
Yep, that's all it is. Yeah.
Okay. And the glycerol doesn't mess up digestion?
Say again?
The glycerol doesn't really mess up your digestion or intestinal?
It doesn't seem to. I mean, I may have tried 4 cans at a time and not had any issues. Like most people haven't really had any issues at higher doses. Yeah, and it serves as a fuel alternative in the brain because, as you know, when you get concussed, Glucose metabolism gets all screwy. You have a high amount of inflammation. So ketones can pass through the blood-brain barrier and can actually still work as a metabolic source of energy, even post-concussion, because the ketone and the lactate pathways don't appear to be impacted, which is kind of crazy. It also has some neuro anti-inflammatory properties. So I have been trying with clients to, if they're up to doing it, obviously their doctor clears it, try 10, 20 grams, maybe 20 minutes before exercise. And in some cases, they're much more tolerant of exercise. Now, again, I think that's probably more on the neurology side than it is providing a fuel. Some of the ketones do go to muscle, some of it go to cardiac, but the limited data we have so far shows that brain and cardiac tissue may even prefer ketones over muscle tissue, which is interesting.
Okay, great. Well, I would love to try that one.
Yeah, we'll get you some. I know they're reformulating stuff. The new formula will be out in August or September, sometime around there. But yeah, they can get the old formula, which still tastes pretty decent, actually.
Awesome. And it's also easier. It's easier for the brain to break down into usable energy because there are less conversion steps than when you're trying to use glucose as a fuel in the brain, correct? That's kind of part of the concept. Is it just an easier fuel for the brain to latch onto and use?
I would say in a state of post-concussion, yes, because the glucose metabolism just has this huge monkey wrench thrown into it. And that you end up with this mismatch of your brain's like, oh my God, what the hell happened? We need more energy to try to fix all this broken crap that's going on. And your blood-brain barrier may have opened up. And so now you got all this crap flowing in your brain that's not supposed to be there, triggering inflammation, which is just making the energy intensity go up higher because it needs energy in order to get rid of the inflammation. And the body's ability, to the brain's ability to use lactate and ketones doesn't appear to be impacted by the concussion, where we know glucose metabolism goes kind of goofy. In most people, glucose is still a preferred fuel, but the brain can also still use ketones. But post-concussion, glucose usage kind of goes down. To what degree and to how much, it's all up for debate because you can't run what's called a clamp study across the brain. You can do that across muscle. Can't really do that across the brain.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think, or like, where would you want to see research go in terms of like, are there like burning questions that you would love to see a team of researchers with endless funding come in and try to solve?
I mean, to me, the first question I would have is what I call like the kitchen sink approach. If we were to set this up as a study, what is I think one, showing that these therapies are effective, because I think there's a fair amount of people who still believe that, doing neuro rehab and, grading exercise, post-concussion, all that stuff. Yeah, I don't know. That just sounds kind of funky, hokey to me. Like, show me all the studies. Right? We can show lots of studies looking at principles and, outcomes and stuff like that. But I think just even having what I call like the kitchen sink study of, okay, we're going to maybe give them ketones beforehand. Maybe we're going to do some parasympathetic stuff before it. They're going to do drills that make them more stable. We've got actual, data showing that happens. Okay, we're going to slowly grade up their exercise. They're going to do maybe a range of motion testing to make sure that it's okay for them. We're going to monitor HRV the next day, right? All this stuff would be a monster pain in the absolute ass to do, and it would be hard for compliance. And of course, the number one criticism would rightfully be, if it works, well, we don't know what component of this actually helped the most. I 100% agree. But just doing something like that to show that, hey, look at this person, look at how bad their concussion was, how intolerant of exercise they were. And yeah, we did this like kitchen sink approach with all these professionals, but in 4 months, they were back to normal, or 3 months, or, whatever the duration was. I think as much as that's not a classic randomized, double-blind crossover, placebo-controlled study, I think that's more meaningful than to people who have this than the other studies. The other studies are super cool for mechanism and understanding it and building off of it. 100%. Totally agree. Like, should all those things be done? Absolutely, they should be done. But that is a long, freaking process, even with unending funds and people to run it and everything else. But I think even just, like a kitchen sink approach to show someone that's like, yeah, look, we actually have actual data here that if you do these things, yes, I know it's a pain in the butt, but odds are with this group of 20 people or whatever, vast majority of them got better within 3 months, 4 months, whatever the time frame is. I think that would be more useful to show that it is possible that the system is that plastic, that it can be changed that much. Because I think it's kind of shocking to us that there's still people out there who think that, hey, whatever happens post concussion, it's kind of the way it is. Like if you had a concussion 5 years ago, like your brain's fixed. Like nothing's changing at that point, which we know that's like completely not true at all. But I unfortunately, I still think there's a fair amount of people who believe that. I've run into athletes who are like, just even testing here at my place, I'm like, okay, you've had a concussion, right? Like, I know it's not on your form, I know it's not on your history, but like, I'm pretty sure you had a concussion. And they're like, oh yeah, like 6 years ago I had this thing or that thing, like, and they were just told, don't worry about it, it's not a thing, just walk it off, whatever. So yeah, I think the first question is what is actually physically possible. The next question is then worry about mechanisms and deeper dive inside.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, like those kitchen sink studies are some of the most interesting ones to read.
Oh, totally.
Actually do figure out how to do them in a way. And yeah, because then the frustrating thing is that as a clinician, none of us are doing just one therapy with our patients. Nope. Like we are always doing all of the things. And so many of my patients, when I come in and we're doing acupuncture and nutrition and herbal therapies and neuro rehab therapies, head-eye vestibular rehab. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I'm getting better, but I don't know what's working. So they're kind of like, what can we take out? And I'm like, well, we don't actually know which of these one things is working. And it's more likely that they're all working together. So we got to kind of just keep moving forwards and gradually tweaking things and making sure you're still on the right path. But I love the concept of that kitchen sink study of let's give people some ketones and some exercise and some neuro rehab and do a bunch of before and after metrics and show that these people got better.
Yeah. And even with clients, I give them that option. I'm like, hey, here's our options. We can throw a whole bunch of stuff at it, assuming you have time and assuming you can be compliant. I do think that is probably the shortest path to getting better. However, you will have no idea what thing was the main driver. Will probably be virtually impossible for us to tell, but you'll probably be better sooner. Or we can take a more stepwise approach. It's going to take a little bit longer, but you would probably have a greater confidence to say this thing was the main driver. And so then I just kind of have them pick because people want, well, I want the fastest approach. I want to know exactly what the thing was. Like, that's not an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your podcast. I mean, you've done over 300 episodes. Is it mostly focused on nutrition or is it kind of the gamut of all of your expertise? I've been drinking Purity coffee now for over 2 years. And one of the things that I absolutely love about Purity Coffee is the fact that they do rigorous testing for mold toxins, pesticides, and heavy metals, which allows me to be able to drink their coffee and rest easy knowing that I am not consuming toxic chemicals, mycotoxins, or possibly heavy metals. I know a lot of our listeners are paying a lot of attention to their health and trying to do everything they can to stay healthy. And if you are a coffee drinker, one of the things that I would recommend is making sure that you're drinking a coffee that isn't putting more toxins into your body. If you would like to try Purity Coffee, you can get 20% off your first order using our promo code LIFEAFTER20 by going to puritycoffee.com and entering that in the promo code box at checkout.
Yeah, when I started it, so obviously I have a certification that's mostly on nutrition recovery, which is a Flex Diet cert. I have one that's more on advanced recovery, which is a physiologic flexibility. I was looking at temp changes, pH changes, lactate and ketones, and then CO2 and O2 regulation. And initially I started as a way to just, kind of promote the certification. It was more on the nutrition side. And I started off just like having, I'd say, really rote questions, and you kind of pick like, ooh, the bigger people in the area you want to have on and stuff. And I remember doing one with Dom D'Agostino, who I've known for years. And so I had all my questions out, and we get on there, and he's like, oh, how's it going, man? I was like, oh, good. He's like, yeah, I just finished a fast for 72 hours and then just did a max deadlift. I was like, what? So we ended up like, I threw out all the questions. I had spent like 2 days trying to get ready for it. I'm like, well, I'll just talk to him about this anyway, and then I realized, oh, if I'm not interested in talking to people, like, why would anyone else want to listen? And I realized that, as of now, like, we have a couple of people that help sponsor the show through affiliate links, but I'm the only one doing it. Like, I pick all the guests I want, and I'm just want it as a way of kind of selfishly, like, conversations that I want to have that I think other people would find interesting. So we've had everything from, we just had Jim Fadiman on talking about microdosing from their new book, to, a guy who was a bodybuilder that went from 14 years being natural to now using performance enhancing drugs, to a guy talking about the enhanced games, to creatine research for neurology. We've had a couple functional neurology people on. So just kind of I'd say a wide variety. We had a Dr. Patel on talking about a mitochondrial blood test you can do. So just kind of anything I find that's in the, exercise, nutrition, health, performance area, that something like, hey, I really want to talk to them about, this thing or that thing. Or I even have a lot of friends in the industry. I'll just be like, hey, I saw you have this new study. Do you want to just come on the podcast and talk about it? So, yeah, so it's been fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so that brings up a question. What are your thoughts on creatine as far as like the brain? Because I remember back in like 2016, 2017, I was looking at a lot of the animal research on creatine, saying, oh, this looks like it's very effective for neurodegenerative conditions.
Yep.
And then there was a very large scale NIH funded study on Parkinson's where they had phase 1, phase 2 trials, and they just didn't show any benefits. But then now I've heard there's other research looking at, when people have the second impact syndrome where they get one concussion and then the second concussion actually causes a death. And they're thinking that the concussion is depleting creatine levels in the brain. And then now they're looking at long COVID or, COVID infections and saying that when you have COVID, it can also deplete creatine, and then people can have cognitive symptoms. So where, have you been pouring into this research, and what are your thoughts on creatine for the brain specifically?
Yeah, I think there was a new study I put on my Instagram that showed a benefit with creatine and reduction. I think it was, might have been Parkinson's risk. I'd have to go back and look again. But my general thought is it a, air quotes, cure-all for everything? No. Are there a lot of trials that show almost any negative downside? I would say no. Some trials may show, like you mentioned, no benefit, but some of them show pretty big benefits. Creatine, last time I looked in PubMed, had creatine monohydrate, I think had 543 references. So it's been studied very well since the 90s. People now have consumed bazillions of doses of creatine. There's almost no side effects from it, really. Right. So in terms of safety, we know it's incredibly safe. It's the running joke I make, which I stole from Dr. Tom Inclinon, is there's way more studies on creatine than the freaking ketchup in my refrigerator right now, right? So very safe. Dosing for neurologic stuff is still up in the air. I would say, so what I've done myself before kiteboarding trips, that any athletes I work with who are in any sport where concussion is a real risk, was it MMA, American football, potentially even soccer, stuff like that. Probably for years now, I'm like, during in season, probably go up to 10 to 20 grams per day. We don't know of any downsides. We do know there is some potential upsides. There's some very impressive mouse data showing what would translate to 20 grams in a human. They gave mice what the equivalent mouse dose was, and then they whacked a bunch of mice on the head, and the other group they did not. The group of mice that they whacked on the head that had creatine were much, much better. Now, the downside of that research is, so I had Dr. Eric Ralston on the podcast, so he's done a lot of creatine research in humans, is that humans don't accumulate creatine in the brain at the same rate of mice. So trying to take the animal and the preclinical data to translate it to humans is pretty hard. Obviously, there's not a good biopsy for the brain, so you have to use non-invasive technology like MRS and other things to try to get an idea of what's going on. The amount of creatine in the brain is very small on top of it, but very important. So right now, I would say 10 to 20 grams is probably the appropriate dose. You probably do need a higher. For muscle saturation, 5 to 10 grams at 30 days will completely saturate muscle. We don't know what the kinetics are for the brain. It's probably longer and probably higher doses. The good part is we don't know much of a negative downside of that. So, so I would say most people, like, I can't really think of a case where I've not really recommended creatine unless they've got just really weird kidney issues or something like that. And that's just more, just do whatever your doctor says.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying like a really good kind of real world application of it would be if somebody is participating in some kind of sport that has a high risk for either subconcussive hits to the head or actual concussions, that taking it as a preventative, as a way of keeping brain levels of creatine, adequate, could actually have a protective effect. It
could. If you talk to the hardcore researchers in that area, they would say, maybe. There's some data of it being used prophylactically. My counter argument would be, I don't know of a downside, right? I don't literally, even theoretically or in practice, like, other than, it's it's not even really that expensive anymore. Taking 20 grams a day is kind of a pain in the butt. You probably have to split your doses. Other than that, I don't know of a downside. So for me personally, like, before I go kiteboarding, I'll use very high doses of creatine, 20 grams per day. Sometimes I'll use CBD, astaxanthin, and then I actually carry ketones with me. So for me personally, if I were to get whacked in the head, the first thing I would do is probably 20 or 30 grams of a ketone ester, and then I would transition into a ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
That's just my bias personally.
Yeah. I was taking it more so to help me with CrossFit, and then I felt like I started to get a little too bulky, and
I've never had that issue.
my body's very good at putting on muscle, but it doesn't love to burn fat, and so I feel like it's easy for me to like bulk up and get bigger, but like I'm not actually like feeling small, like getting slimmed down. So anyway, I stopped taking it because I felt like I was getting a little too hulked out. So it was purely cosmetic reasons for stopping.
There is the people who are probably more hyper responders to it also. I might and there is some water weight.
Like maybe just take it for like 2 months and then stop. And, I think I might try pulsing it a little bit, see how that goes.
Yeah. And you can go to a lower dose too. I mean, there's some data showing as low as, for performance stuff, 2 grams a day may be enough too. So
yeah, I was doing 5. So I was thinking maybe I just try like 2 or 3 and see if that's, enough. Cause I mean, I was getting a lot of PRs during like the 4 months that I took it. And I felt like I could tell that it was working. And, so I was like, oh, this is great. PRs every week.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'd do it.
Yeah, exactly. And now I feel like I'm plateauing a little bit. So maybe it's time to.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I would love to have you on again, and maybe we can do a deeper dive into the ketone conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I did a whole program for the Carrick Institute on that. They can find about the use of ketones, ketogenic diets primarily for concussion. There's not a ton of human data on it, but there's a fair amount of animal data. There's a lot of physiologic rationale behind how it can be helpful. I have a bunch of anecdotal reports now that are pretty crazy. But yeah, it's one of those things that if there's any functional neurology people listening, we've got tons of data showing that the products are safe. It'd be as simple as, just testing it out before patients, especially patients who have a very hard time making it through the therapy because they just get completely torched. Like, I would be super interested if you give them 20 grams of ketone ester, are they able to then do higher quality therapy, which would then, promote their recovery? That'd be my hypothesis.
Yeah. Awesome. And where can people find you? I know you've got a website, a newsletter, the podcast.
Yeah, so best way is probably the website, which is MikeTNelson.com. The little newsletter tab up there. You can sign up to the newsletter. So I usually write daily for the newsletter, which is free. Trying to make it interesting and entertaining as best I can. And then we have the podcast, which is just Flex Diet Podcast. And then we do have some stuff on Instagram also, just under Dr. Mike T. Nelson.
Awesome. What's the T stand for?
I tell people Tiger, but they don't believe me. It's actually Thomas.
Okay. Nice. Well, I still need to get over there so we can run my VO2 max. So
yeah, for sure. I'm actually literally sending it out to be calibrated this week. So hopefully it'll be back relatively soon.
All right. Well, send me a text and love to make that happen
too.
Yeah,
awesome.
Okay, sweet. Well, have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. Bye. Medical disclaimer. This video or podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and materials included is at the user's own risk. The content of this video or podcast is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and consumers of this information should seek the advice of a medical professional for any and all health-related issues. A link to our full medical disclaimer is available in the notes.